The flame awakens. The crystalline hulls of the Xarian diplomatic vessel, Starweaver, shimmered in the dim light of distant starlight. Manda, a Xarian diplomat of high regard, tossed restlessly in her sleeping pod. Her azure skin, usually smooth and cool, was damp with an uncharacteristic sheen of sweat. Waves of heat pulsed through her body, unfamiliar and relentless. The polished, iridescent walls of her quarters reflected her trembling form as she stumbled to the environmental controls. "Computer," she rasped, her melodic voice roughened by strain. "Temperature reading." Chamber temperature maintained standard Xarian comfort levels at 18 degrees Celsius, the AI replied smoothly. Manda's reflection caught her eye. Her normally silver-ringed pupils were consumed by inky black, her neck and shoulder markings darkened to an ominous indigo. She gasped, gripping the console. The flame. The primal biological drive every Xarian revered and dreaded. It was the unbidden force that drove her species to find a mate, a desperate imperative no amount of training or tradition could suppress. It shouldn't have been happening now. Not here, not on a diplomatic mission. The flame was supposed to be triggered only on their homeworld under controlled circumstances, yet her body burned with a singular, undeniable purpose. The unexpected catalyst. The sharp knock at her door jolted her from her thoughts. "First Diplomat Manda, the human delegation has arrived for the trade negotiations," announced a junior officer from outside. Manda stiffened. She couldn't face them like this, not with her instincts in turmoil. "Postpone," she barked, then quickly softened her tone. "Apologies, I mean. Inform the council I am indisposed due to medical reasons." A brief silence followed. "Understood. First Diplomat. Shall I alert medical personnel?" "No," Manda snapped, her voice tinged with desperation. "This is private." As the officer's footsteps retreated, Manda accessed her console, her trembling fingers moving swiftly. She scanned the diplomatic logs of recent events, searching for any anomaly that could explain this untimely affliction. One name stood out, burning as bright in her mind as the fire coursing through her veins. Ryan Trevor, a human. Captain Ryan Trevor of the Earth Defense Force. Their encounter had been brief. 3 weeks ago during a routine security consultation. He had been tall and imposing, with sharp features and piercing eyes that exuded strength and intelligence. At the time, she had dismissed her heightened awareness of him as mere curiosity. Now, reviewing the recorded interaction, she recognized the subtle cues she'd ignored. Her unconscious leaning toward him, the darkening of her markings, the quickened pulse. The flame had chosen him. Impossible connections. Manda's heart raced as she scored his file. Captain Trevor was no longer active in the Earth Defense Force. He had retired to a remote region on Earth. The realization struck her like a comet. Xarians and humans were biologically incompatible. It wasn't possible. Her flame shouldn't recognize him as a viable mate. And yet, her body screamed otherwise, every cell aching with an ancient instinct to seek and claim. Her rational mind warred with her primal urge. Humans were allies, yes, but their species had never mingled on this level. The Xarian Council would consider her behavior a scandal, a betrayal of diplomatic decorum. Her people would never accept it. She gripped the edge of her console, trying to focus through the storm raging within her. But rationality was a distant voice drowned by the roar of instinct. Her blood surged, her vision narrowing to a singular focus. Find him. The decision. Manda inhaled sharply, a predatory glint flashing in her darkened eyes. She pulled up her authorization codes, overriding layers of security protocols with practiced efficiency. If she left now, it would take hours, perhaps days, before anyone realized she'd gone rogue. It would buy her just enough time to reach Earth. The console chimed. Unauthorized action detected. Diplomatic protocols breached. Manda silenced the alerts with a single command. Her hands danced over the interface, plotting a direct course to Captain Trevor's last known coordinates. Her heart pounded as the ship's engines roared to life, breaking free from the Starweaver's docking bay. Alarms echoed behind her, but she didn't look back. Her reflection on the control panel flickered. A fierce, determined alien with a fiery purpose. For better or worse, she had made her choice. The hunt had begun. The human element. The transport vessel hummed with steady purpose as Manda approached Earth's atmosphere. Her mind raced, battling the duality of her identity, the diplomat sworn to peace and protocol, and the predator ignited by primal instinct. The flame had burned through her carefully constructed life, leaving her raw, vulnerable, and focused on a single goal. Ryan Trevor. Her fingers gripped the ship's controls as she descended toward Earth's surface. The coordinates she'd gathered pointed to a secluded location, a mountainous region on the continent formerly known as North America. The area was sparsely populated, with vast stretches of forest and jagged peaks that whispered of isolation and secrecy. It was a fitting retreat for someone like Trevor, a man who had once stood at the forefront of Earth's defense, now hidden in the shadows of his own world. Arrival in the unknown. As the transport landed in a clearing surrounded by towering trees, Manda felt an unfamiliar unease. Earth's gravity was heavier than that of Sirian, its air denser, richer with oxygen. She adjusted the atmospheric filters embedded in her skin, allowing herself to acclimate. The alien world pressed in around her, its sounds and scents a chaotic symphony compared to the ordered elegance of Sirian. Her crystalline armor shifted to a muted silver, blending with the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. She stepped onto the forest floor, her boots crunching softly against fallen leaves. Each breath she took was filled with the scent of earth, loamy soil, pine, and something faintly sweet she couldn't identify. It was intoxicating in its own way, grounding her even as her mind reeled with anticipation. She accessed her handheld device, triangulating Trevor's exact location, a small remote cabin nestled in the mountains, a few kilometers north. The flame surged within her, urging her forward, but she forced herself to pause. She was entering his territory now, a place where humans were unpredictable and their technology often intrusive. First signs of humanity. The journey through the forest was both exhilarating and unnerving. The terrain was rugged, the paths undefined. Manda moved with the agility of her kind, her steps almost silent despite the unfamiliar ground. Along the way, she caught glimpses of Earth's wildlife, creatures that darted between trees, their movements quick and alert. They watched her with curious eyes before retreating into the shadows, sensing her otherness. As she neared the coordinates, she noticed signs of human habitation. A narrow dirt trail, the faint smell of wood smoke, and the distant sound of running water. Her heartbeat quickened. She was close. Then she saw it. The cabin. It was modest in size, constructed of dark wood with a stone chimney that puffed faint wisps of smoke into the crisp air. The sight stirred something in her, an unfamiliar warmth that mixed with the fiery pull of the flame. It was a home, a place of solitude and simplicity, far removed from the towering crystalline structures of her world. The first encounter. Manda took a moment to observe the cabin from a distance. A human figure emerged from the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, carrying a bundle of firewood. Even from this distance, she recognized him. Ryan Trevor moved with an ease that belied his past as a soldier. His dark hair was slightly unkempt, and his features bore the quiet strength she remembered from their brief encounter. Her heart pounded in her chest as she watched him set the firewood down and stretch, gazing out into the forest. There was a stillness about him, a contentment that seemed at odds with the chaos she had brought to his doorstep. For a moment, doubt crept into her mind. What was she doing here, intruding on his peace? What could she possibly offer him that wouldn't shatter this fragile sanctuary? But the flame left no room for hesitation. She stepped forward, emerging from the tree line with deliberate slowness, her movements calculated to avoid startling him. The sound of her footsteps on the gravel path made him turn, his sharp eyes narrowing as they locked onto her. "Captain Trevor," she said, her voice steady despite the storm within. "We need to talk." Shock and recognition. Rayan's expression shifted from confusion to recognition, then wariness. "First Diplomat Manda," he said, his tone carefully measured. "I didn't expect to see you again, especially not here. What's going on?" She hesitated, unsure how to explain. The words felt too heavy, too alien. How could she convey the urgency of the flame without sounding unhinged? How could she make him understand that her presence wasn't just a choice, but a necessity? "I'd require your help," she began, choosing her words carefully. "This is not an official visit. It's personal." His brow furrowed, and she saw the tension in his stance. Yet there was no fear in his gaze, only curiosity and concern. "Personal," he echoed. "You traveled across the galaxy for something personal." "Yes." The admission felt like a release, though it left her vulnerable. "I cannot explain it fully. At least, not yet. But I had no other choice." For a moment, they stood in silence, two beings from different worlds caught in the gravity of something far greater than themselves. Ryan studied her, his sharp mind no doubt analyzing every detail. Then, with a small nod, he gestured toward the cabin. "All right," he said, "let's talk." Crossing the threshold, as Manda followed him inside, the warmth of the cabin enveloped her. It was a stark contrast to the sleek, sterile environments she was used to. The scent of wood and leather filled the air, mingling with the faint aroma of something cooking. It was a place of life, of humanity, and she felt an unexpected pang of envy for its simplicity. Ryan motioned for her to sit at a small table near the fireplace. "Whatever brought you here," he said, his voice calm but firm, "it must be serious. Start from the beginning." Manda looked into his eyes, the flames from the hearth reflecting in her dark pupils. The moment of truth had arrived, and with it, the first step into a story that would change them both forever. A truth unveiled. The warmth of the fire crackled in the silence as Manda sat at the small wooden table. Her gaze drifted to the flames, their dance mirroring the turmoil within her. Ryan Trever sat across from her, his posture relaxed yet alert, the weight of his curiosity and wariness hanging in the air. "You've got my attention," he said, his voice steady but edged with caution. "What brought you here, really?" Manda inhaled deeply. Words were her craft as a diplomat, yet none seemed sufficient for this moment. How could she translate the firestorm of instinct, biology, and emotion coursing through her into human terms? Her silver-ringed pupils flicked up to meet his, their intensity unmasked. "It is difficult to explain," she began, her voice soft but resolute. "But I must try. There is something within my species, an ancient imperative we call the flame. It guides us to seek a mate when the time is right." Ryan's eyebrows lifted slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "A mate? Like marriage?" Manda shook her head. "Not as humans understand it. This is biological, primal. It overrides reason, logic, even centuries of training. I have seen it in others of my kind, but never thought, never imagined it would happen to me. And certainly not like this." Ryan leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "So, you're saying this flame brought you here, to me? Revelations and doubts." Manda nodded slowly. "The flame should only lead us to another Xarian. Our biology is too different from yours, our genetic codes incompatible. It should be impossible, yet here I am." Ryan rubbed his jaw, his expression unreadable. "That's a lot to unpack. Let me get this straight. You traveled across the galaxy because your biology thinks I'm, what? Some kind of alien soulmate?" The bluntness of his words stung, but Manda met his gaze steadily. "Yes, I understand how it sounds, and I would not blame you for disbelief. But the flame is undeniable. It is not merely a feeling. It is a drive, a necessity. My body will not rest until it is answered." His eyes narrowed, skepticism mingling with curiosity. "And what happens if it isn't answered?" Manda hesitated, her composure faltering for the first time. Xarian who resist the flame often lose themselves. It is as if their minds burn away, leaving only the hunger. I have seen it. It is a fate I would not wish on anyone. Ryan stared at her, the firelight reflecting in his thoughtful eyes. And you think I'm the answer? A human. We're not even the same species. I know, she said quietly. But the flame doesn't care about logic or science. It chose you. Human logic meets alien instinct. Ryan stood, pacing slowly across the room. Manda watched him, her senses hyper-aware of every movement. Despite her training, she couldn't suppress the primal part of her mind that cataloged his strength, his confidence, the subtle grace in his steps. It was maddening how every aspect of him seemed to draw her in further. So let me get this straight, he said finally. This isn't something you can control. You didn't wake up one day and decide to crash land in my backyard because you thought I'd make a good partner. Correct, she said. If I could resist it, I would. I did not come here to disrupt your life, Ryan Trevor. But the flame has made that choice for me. He turned to face her, his expression softer now, though still guarded. You're putting a lot on me, Manda. I'm just a guy who's trying to live a quiet life. I don't know what you expect me to do. Manda's voice was steady as she replied. I do not know either, but I came here to understand, to see if there is something between us. If there is not, I will leave. His jaw tightened. And if there is, then we will find a way forward, she said simply. Together. An uneasy alliance. Ryan's skepticism hadn't faded, but he could see the sincerity in her eyes, the vulnerability she struggled to mask. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, I don't fully understand this flame thing. But if it's as serious as you say, I'm not going to just send you packing. At least, not until I know more. Hope flickered in Manda's chest. Thank you. But let's set some ground rules, he added, his tone firm. First, no surprises. If there's something I need to know about this flame or your biology or whatever, you tell me up front. Deal. Deal, she agreed. Second, he continued, if at any point this gets too weird, I reserve the right to call it off. No hard feelings. Manda hesitated, then nodded. Understood. And third, Ryan said, a small smile tugging at his lips, you're going to have to explain this whole flame thing a lot better, because right now I feel like I'm in a bad sci-fi movie. Despite herself, Manda laughed, a soft, melodic sound that seemed to lighten the tension in the room. You are handling this better than I expected. I've had practice with the unexpected, he said with a shrug. Let's just say I'm keeping an open mind. For now. The hunt continues. As they sat together by the fire, Manda began to share more about the flame and her people's customs, her voice steady and clear. Ryan listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that hinted at a mind as sharp as it was compassionate. For the first time since the flame had ignited within her, Manda felt a sense of calm, not the extinguishing of her desire, but a momentary peace in knowing she wasn't facing it alone. But deep within, she knew this was only the beginning. The flame was insatiable, relentless. This uneasy alliance was merely the first step in a journey that would challenge them both in ways they couldn't yet imagine. And in the shadows beyond the cabin's warm light, the forest seemed to hold its breath, as if it too anticipated what was to come. Shadows of the unknown. The forest seemed to hum with a quiet tension as night descended. Manda stood by the cabin window, staring into the darkness beyond the tree line. The warmth of the fire behind her contrasted sharply with the cool alien pull of the flame within her. Ryan sat at the table, nursing a mug of something he called coffee, a bitter yet oddly comforting drink. So, what happens next? He asked, his voice breaking the silence. Manda turned toward him, her silver-ringed pupils narrowing slightly. I do not know, she admitted. The flame is unpredictable. It compels me to act, but it does not provide guidance. I only know it brought me here, to you. Ryan leaned back in his chair, regarding her thoughtfully. And you think I can just solve this for you? Figure out why your biology decided to rewrite the rules. She tilted her head, her azure skin catching the firelight. Perhaps, or perhaps there is something about you, something my body senses that I cannot yet comprehend. Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Great. No pressure. A warning from the void. Their conversation was interrupted by the sharp chirp of Manda's communicator. Her hand darted to the device on her wrist, her markings darkening instinctively in alarm. The holographic display blinked to life, projecting the image of a Xarian officer. His expression was stern, his markings a pale blue, a signal of controlled urgency. First Diplomat Manda, the officer said, his tone formal but edged with concern. Your unauthorized departure has triggered an inquiry. The High Council demands your immediate return. Manda's jaw tightened. I cannot comply. The officer's gaze hardened. You are endangering not only yourself but diplomatic relations between Xarian and Earth. The Council has authorized a retrieval mission. They will not be patient. I understand, she replied, her voice steady despite the weight of his words. But my actions are my own. The flame is not something I can negotiate or suppress. The officer's image flickered as he sighed heavily. Then I suggest you find resolution quickly. Xarian ships are already en route. As the hologram disappeared, Ryan raised an eyebrow. Sounds like you're on borrowed time. I always have been, Manda replied, her voice soft but resolute. The flame leaves no room for delays. A growing connection. Ryan set his mug down and leaned forward. So your people are sending ships after you. What's the plan? You can't just hide here forever. I am not hiding, she said, her gaze unwavering. But I must find balance before they arrive. If I return as I am now, I will be a danger to them and to myself. Ryan rubbed his temples, his mind clearly racing. Okay, let's think this through. If your flame is some kind of biological instinct, there's got to be a way to address it without turning this into an interstellar crisis. Manda watched him, noting the way his mind worked, logical, focused, and adaptive. It was a trait she admired, one that contrasted with the rigid traditions of her people. You think like a strategist, she said. It is reassuring. Ryan gave a half smile. Guess old habits die hard. But seriously, Manda, if you need to figure this out, I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. What does the flame want from me? She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. It wants connection, compatibility. It seeks to merge the strongest traits of two beings, creating a bond that strengthens both. His brow furrowed. So this is about evolution, survival. Perhaps, she said, or perhaps it is about something deeper. My people have never questioned the flame's purpose. We simply obey. Well, Ryan said, standing, maybe it's time someone questioned it. A test of trust. As the night deepened, Ryan proposed an idea. If this thing is about connection, let's test it. Spend time together. Talk, interact, whatever it takes. Maybe we can figure out what's really going on. Manda hesitated. The suggestion was logical, yet the thought of deliberately engaging with him felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The flame surged within her, urging her closer, yet she fought to maintain control. You are willing to do this? She asked. Why not? He said with a shrug. Worst case scenario. We figure out nothing, and your people come to drag you back. Best case, we solve your flame problem, and maybe save some interstellar diplomacy while we're at it. She gave a small nod, the hint of a smile playing at her lips. Very well. Let us begin. The first exercise was simple. Conversation. Ryan asked her about Xarian culture, about the crystalline architecture of their cities, the symbiotic relationship they shared with their technology. In turn, she asked him about Earth's history, its conflicts and triumphs, the resilience of humanity in the face of endless challenges. To her surprise, she found herself genuinely intrigued by his stories. Humans were a species defined by their adaptability, their refusal to give up even in the direst circumstances. It was a trait she couldn't help but admire, a trait she now realized might have drawn the flame to Ryan in the first place. The forest speaks. Their connection deepened as they ventured outside the cabin. The forest seemed alive with secrets, its quiet whispers carrying a sense of both foreboding and wonder. Ryan showed her the basics of survival on Earth, how to track game, how to build a fire, how to navigate by the stars. Manda, in turn, shared insights from her own world, how Xarian hunters could read the subtle shifts in energy that signaled movement, how they harmonized with their environment rather than dominating it. It was during one such lesson, as they knelt by a stream, that Ryan looked at her and said, "You know, you're not what I expected." Manda tilted her head. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Something more. Alien, I guess. But you're just as complicated as any human I've ever met." She smiled, a rare and genuine expression. "Perhaps that is why the flame chose you. You remind me that even across the stars, there is more that unites us than divides us." For a moment, the forest grew silent, as if acknowledging the truth of her words. In that stillness, something shifted between them, a fragile understanding, a tentative trust. But the shadows beyond the trees seemed to deepen, as if warning them that this peace would not last forever. The storm within. The forest was alive with tension, the rustling of leaves and distant calls of wildlife, weaving a soundtrack of unease. Manda and Ryan sat by the fire outside the cabin, the soft glow of the flames casting flickering shadows on their faces. Despite the warmth, a chill hung in the air, a foreboding that neither could ignore. Manda's mind wrestled with conflicting instincts. The flame roared within her, relentless and consuming, but her time with Ryan had begun to temper its primal edge. His calm, grounded presence was an anchor in the chaos, a force that both calmed and challenged her. Yet she knew the peace was temporary. The flame demanded resolution, and the Xarian ships closing in would allow no compromise. Signs of the hunt. A sudden shift in the air drew Manda's attention. She rose swiftly, her markings darkening in alarm. "They are close," she said, her voice sharp. Ryan looked up from his seat, his hand instinctively moving to his side where, out of habit, he used to carry his sidearm. "What do you mean? Your people?" "Yes," she replied, scanning the treetops as if expecting to see the shimmering hulls of Xarian ships through the canopy. "Their hunters will not wait long. They will track me here." Ryan stood, his expression unreadable. "What happens when they find you?" She hesitated, the truth heavy on her tongue. "They will try to contain me, by force if necessary, and they will not hesitate to neutralize anyone they perceive as interference." His jaw tightened. "Neutralize? You mean kill?" "Yes," she admitted. "If they deem you a threat, they will act without mercy. Xarian hunters are unmatched in their efficiency." Ryan's eyes darkened, and a flicker of something primal crossed his face. "Then we'd better make sure I don't look like a threat." The plan. Ryan motioned for Manda to follow him inside the cabin. He rummaged through a chest near the fireplace, pulling out a small tablet. Its screen flickered to life, displaying a series of diagrams and maps. Manda stepped closer, intrigued despite the tension. "Earth Defense Force protocols," he explained. "I still have access to some old systems. If your people are as efficient as you say, we need to get ahead of them. Disguise your presence, and maybe even mislead them." Manda studied the display, her mind rapidly adapting to the human technology. "How do you propose to mislead hunters trained to read energy trails and biological imprints?" Ryan smirked. "Humans might not have your fancy abilities, but we're good at improvising. We can create decoys, false trails to buy time." She nodded slowly, impressed by his quick thinking. And then we figure out how to deal with this flame thing before they find us," he said, his tone resolute. "If we can prove you've resolved it, maybe we can get them to back off without a fight." The flames test. As they prepared their plan, Manda found herself studying Ryan with a mixture of admiration and unease. His ability to adapt, his refusal to panic under pressure, it was these traits that the flames seemed to magnify, making her more drawn to him with every passing moment. But the flame was not gentle. It pushed her, testing the limits of her restraint. That night, as they finalized the decoy routes and contingency plans, the flame surged to a peak. Manda gripped the edge of the table, her breathing shallow. Ryan noticed immediately, his brow furrowing with concern. "Manda, what's wrong?" "It is the flame," she managed, her voice strained. "It grows. Stronger." Ryan stepped closer but stopped himself, as if unsure what to do. "What do you need? How can I help?" She looked up at him, her silver-ringed pupils glowing faintly. "You are helping," she said, though her voice trembled. "Your presence tempers it, but only just. I fear it will overwhelm me before we can act." Ryan's expression softened, his hand hovering uncertainly near her shoulder. "You're not alone in this," he said. "We'll figure it out together." Her markings flickered briefly, the indigo fading to a calmer hue. His words, his sincerity, anchored her in that moment. "Thank you," she whispered. "The sky burns." The reprieve was short-lived. In the early hours of the morning, the sky above the forest lit up with the unmistakable glow of Xerian ship engines. Manda and Ryan rushed outside, their breath visible in the crisp air as they stared up at the shimmering crafts descending through the atmosphere. "They're here," Manda said, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. Ryan grabbed a small pack from inside the cabin, slinging it over his shoulder. "Time to move," he said. "We stick to the plan." As they slipped into the forest, the ground vibrated faintly with the landing of the Xerian vessels. Manda's senses were on high alert, every sound and scent heightened. She could feel the hunter's presence, their energy signatures like ripples in a pond. "They will not stop," she said, her tone grim. "Once they lock onto my trail, they will pursue until the end." Ryan glanced at her, his jaw set. "Then we give them something else to follow." With that, they activated the decoy devices, scattering them along false trails that led deep into the wilderness. The devices emitted faint energy pulses mimicking Manda's signature, designed to confuse the Xerian hunters. A race against time. The forest became a labyrinth of shadows and light as Manda and Ryan moved swiftly through its depths. Every step felt like a gamble, every breath a reminder of the stakes. The flame surged within her, its urgency threatening to break her focus, but she pushed it aside, drawing strength from Ryan's unshakable resolve. Behind them, the forest echoed with faint sounds, footsteps, voices, the low hum of Xerian tracking devices. The hunters were closing in. Ryan paused, placing a hand on Manda's arm. "Wait," he whispered. "Listen." She stilled, her heightened senses attuning to the sounds around them. The hunters were splitting up, their movements precise and calculated. It was only a matter of time before one of them discovered the truth. "They are skilled," Manda admitted, her voice barely audible. "But they underestimate you." Ryan gave a small, determined smile. "Let's hope they keep doing that." As they pressed on, the flame burned brighter, its heat an almost unbearable force. Yet with every step, Manda felt something else growing within her, something stronger than instinct or biology. It was a fragile hope, born of trust and forged in the crucible of their shared struggle. For now, it was enough to keep moving. The hunt's turning point. The forest came alive with flickers of light and faint whispers carried on the wind. Manda and Ryan pressed on, their footsteps carefully muffled against the uneven terrain. The flame pulsed within her, a steady rhythm that both guided and tormented her. Each beat seemed to sync with the tension of the moment as the Xerian hunters closed in. Ryan motioned for her to stop, crouching low behind a cluster of rocks. "They're moving faster," he murmured, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. "Your decoys worked, but not for long." Manda knelt beside him, her markings glowing faintly as she tuned her senses to the energy fields around them. "They are relentless. Xarian hunters do not tire easily. They will follow until they are certain I am neutralized. Ryan adjusted the straps of his pack and glanced at her. Then we need to stop running. If they're not giving up, neither are we. A dangerous proposal. Manda looked at him, surprised. What are you suggesting? We turn the tables, he said, his voice calm but firm. Right now, they think they're hunting you. What if we make them think they're the ones being hunted? She frowned, the idea foreign and unsettling. That is unorthodox. Xarian hunters are highly trained. They will not fall for such tactics. Ryan smirked. Maybe not from one of your kind. But humans, we're good at thinking outside the box. Manda hesitated, the flame urging her forward while her logical mind weighed the risks. If we do this, we must act quickly. They will not hesitate to escalate. Then let's give them something to think about, Ryan said, pulling a small device from his pack. It was a human tool, a tactical jammer designed to disrupt communication systems. We cut them off from each other, create confusion. Once they're scattered, we find a way to deal with them individually. Her silver-ringed pupils widened slightly as she considered the plan. You are suggesting we confront them directly. It's a gamble, he admitted, but it's better than running blind. The first move. Manda nodded, her resolve hardening. Together, they moved deeper into the forest, choosing a location with natural choke points to limit the hunter's mobility. Ryan set up the jammer on a tree trunk, activating it with a low hum that seemed to reverberate through the air. They'll notice this pretty quickly, he said, glancing at her. We need to be ready. Manda closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. The flame burned brighter, sharpening her senses and instincts. When she opened her eyes, they glowed faintly in the darkness. Let them come. The first Xarian hunter appeared moments later, moving with almost ghostly precision through the trees. His crystalline armor shimmered faintly, reflecting the moonlight. Manda recognized him instantly, a veteran tracker named Kale, known for his unyielding efficiency. Kale paused, his head tilting as he scanned the area. First Diplomat Manda, he called, his voice calm but commanding. Surrender now, and this will end peacefully. Ryan exchanged a glance with Manda, his hand tightening around a makeshift weapon he'd fashioned, a thick branch sharpened to a point. Manda stepped forward, her voice steady. Kale, she said, addressing him formally. I cannot comply. Kale's gaze hardened. You are endangering yourself and others. The flame has clouded your judgment. It has not, she replied, her tone firm. It has brought me clarity. This is not a sickness to be purged. It is a truth to be understood. Kale raised his hand, signaling to the others hidden nearby. You leave me no choice. The clash. Before Kale could act, Ryan hurled the sharpened branch, striking the ground near the hunter's feet. The sudden move startled Kale, who instinctively stepped back. Ryan took advantage of the moment, darting forward and activating another decoy device. It exploded with a flash of light and a burst of sound, momentarily disorienting the Xarian. Manda leaped into action, using her agility to disable Kale's weapon. Her movements were fluid, almost predatory, as she outmaneuvered him. Ryan joined the fray, his human unpredictability throwing off the hunter's calculated strategies. Together, they forced Kale into retreat, but the victory was short-lived as the sounds of approaching footsteps signaled the arrival of more hunters. A fragile alliance. Ryan and Manda fell back to the designated choke point, regrouping as the forest seemed to close in around them. Manda's breath came in short bursts, the flame surging with a mix of exhilaration and exhaustion. Ryan's face was set in grim determination. They're not stopping, he said, his voice low. What's the next move? Manda hesitated, then made a decision. We must confront them directly, but not as prey. They need to understand that I am not their enemy. Ryan raised an eyebrow. You think they'll listen? They will if I can show them the truth, she said. But I will need your help. He nodded without hesitation. I'm in. The final gambit. As the hunters closed in, Manda stepped into the open, her posture defiant. Ryan stayed hidden nearby, ready to act if things went wrong. The lead hunter, a tall Xarian female with markings that glowed like molten gold, approached, her weapon drawn. "Manda," the hunter said, her voice cold. "This ends now." "No," Manda replied, her tone steady and commanding. "This begins now." She raised her hands, her energy shifting as she projected the flame outward. The hunters froze, sensing the raw power emanating from her. Manda's markings glowed brightly, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "The flame is not madness," she said. "It is evolution. It has chosen a path we do not yet understand, but one that must be explored. I will not allow tradition to extinguish what could be our future." The hunters hesitated, their weapons lowered slightly. Ryan stepped out of the shadows, his presence a silent testament to her words. For a moment, the forest was silent, the weight of the moment hanging heavy in the air. Then, slowly, the lead hunter nodded. "We will listen." A new understanding. As dawn broke over the forest, the tension began to fade. The hunters agreed to stand down, their skepticism tempered by Manda's unwavering resolve. Ryan watched as she spoke to them, her voice steady and clear, bridging the divide between tradition and the unknown. For the first time, Manda felt the flame's intensity begin to subside, not extinguished, but transformed. It was no longer a force of chaos, but one of purpose. And as Ryan stood beside her, she knew this was only the beginning of their journey.